always amazed how life organizes itself in front of the camera. From chaos becomes poetry and this excitement of the spontaneity of life.
Who is in control inside yourself? Is it you in your conscious, in the present, or it's your subconscious with all your past experience? All those angers, all those fears that are trapped inside us, and sometimes come out of nowhere and makes us do stupid things. You know, it's like it's something that it's a tough task to be an adult, to become a real adult, meaning someone that is in total control of himself in the present time. I make movies because I fall in love with a story that says something meaningful about our world. I love filmmaking.
Born in 1967 in Quebec, Denis Villeneuve began his career at the National Film Board of Canada. His first feature film, August 32nd on Earth, won the Uncertain Regard film at the Cannes Film Festival in 1998, and right away it was clear his voice and point of view were a valuable addition to the cinema zeitgeist. August is a film about a woman whose near-death experience causes her to want to have a baby with a friend who will only agree if they can go on a road trip to Salt Lake City, which is possibly the most French-Canadian film premise of all time. Not done exploring near-death experiences, Villeneuve's follow-up, the year 2000's Maelstrom, dealt with a woman making sense of her life following a watery car crash, which resulted in the murder of the parent of the eventual love interest, narrated by a fish. He fell off the map for nearly a decade, resurfacing in 2009 to release Polytechnique, a dramatization of the 1989 massacre at the Montreal Polytechnic Institute. Critics lavished praise and awards on the film, and Villeneuve was back, following up with Incendie, a film about a trip to the Middle East to fulfill a dying mother's wishes. Incendie was nominated for an Oscar, and Villeneuve was ready to go a bit more mainstream, releasing his 2013 film Prisoners with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, Villeneuve's first directorial project that he didn't also write himself. Prisoners was also nominated for an Oscar for the work of cinematographer Roger Deakins, whom would become a Villeneuve longtime collaborator. The very same year, Villeneuve worked with Gyllenhaal again on Enemy, a bizarre, intense thriller about a man chasing down his doppelganger. It was 2015's Sicario that got the world's attention and catapulted Villeneuve to real fame and acclaim, from mainstream audiences and critics alike. Sicario made bank and netted 3 Oscar nods, and 2016's Arrival cemented Villeneuve as one of Hollywood's go-to directors for interesting projects. The first of Villeneuve's projects to garner an Oscar win, Arrival, showed Villeneuve had superlative sci-fi chops, and he took on a project that would have crushed lesser directors, 2017's Blade Runner 2049. The sheer amount of tradition and expectation didn't faze Villeneuve in the slightest, and he took on an even tougher project in Blade Runner in an adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, a film he wrote, directed, and produced. And, not satisfied with that, also got to work on a television adaptation called Dune: The Sisterhood. The pilot is announced to be completed soon after Villeneuve's Dune movie and his project titled Cleopatra, based on the Stacy Schiff novel, which is in pre-production now. Villeneuve's resume is a relatively short one for a director who has worked in the business for 20 years, but it's also an immaculate one, full of professional accolades, critical acclaim, glowing audience reviews, and commercial success. Whatever Villeneuve tackles after his Dune series, you can bet he'll bring his signature vision and probably a song by Radiohead too.
Welcome back to Director's Cut. We are talking about French-Canadian Denis Villeneuve. I'm your host, Jon Dunning, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jason Alt.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Do you have a French-Canadian drink? Well, to help us, get us through tonight. Are there French-Canadian drinks?
I'm sure a Canadian mule is like Diet Coke and like Black Velvet or something like that. It's a Canada Dry ginger ale and like 3-4% beers. I don't know what a Quebec mule would be, but like it's probably a hockey puck covered in poutine.
That sounds delicious.
I took a trip to Belgium tonight with a Dragon's Mead Final Absolution.
Oh,
it's a Belgian style triple, and I'm gonna get lit tonight.
Jeez, I am back. I'm finishing up a bottle of Clyde Mays. This is some rye whiskey. So, yeah, I have a stiff drink to talk about a stiff subject matter tonight. So, l'chaim.
Prost.
This is one that we've had on the radar for a while, but it's almost like a filmmaker that you want to kind of build up to, because right now he is one of the, I mean, I don't want to say best. That's just like, it just feels like an opinion, but he's just...
You're a fanboy and you want to impress him.
Well,
I get it.
It's more than that, though.
You want to do a good job on this one, John.
He's such a craftsman as far as what he's doing right now. He feels like the modern day Stanley Kubrick. And I really feel that way, even though it feels kind of hyperbolic.
That sounded hyperbolic to me. Wow. Okay. Modern day Kubrick.
He kind of, spits in the face of like your Michael Bays, of like just like big flashy directors, and he's not afraid to kind of bring sci-fi down to like a 2001 kind of slow paced, real kind of boring for a lot of people, but like Blade Runner and Arrival, and now he's going into Dune. Like, these are some real ballsy choices, and I feel like he kind of almost hate directed some of them just to make sure that he could do it right, because he has this great affection towards sci-fi. It's not the way he even started out. He started out as I think Maelstrom, you could almost say, is like a comedy, right?
It's certainly got some like darker comedic elements for sure. He's not making the kind of films he started out making now, because I think there's more money in directing sci-fi and getting to go to cool parties. I think he sold out personally, but like, that's the goal. If anybody would like to help me sell out, I absolutely will. Selling out doesn't mean you lack artistic integrity, and there's nothing easy about tackling a Dune film or Dune TV series, both of which have been attempted already.
Spice!
Yeah, and I mean, if he did Blade Runner 2049 and it turned into Avatar, or it turned into even Alien Covenant, then I would be like, oh god.
Or any adaptation of any video game. People love video games as much as they love the first Blade Runner, and they've just never made a good video game.
They just can't do it. Yeah. Yeah, like if it turned out to be like a World of Warcraft movie, it's just like, okay, no, but he's not only turning in good work, he's elevating the original material. And I know that's kind of a divisive opinion, because there is so many people that are just like, that think that the original Blade Runner is complete sacrosanct. I am not one of those people.
Well, imagine you grew up in the 80s and you didn't get good sci-fi. You got a good sci-fi movie every couple of years.
Yeah.
If Blade Runner had come out for the first time now, it would have been just another movie, Even as good as it was. It's just like, yeah, we get lots of movies like this now. But like, we didn't get lots of movies like Blade Runner when Blade Runner came out. Blade Runner wasn't perfect, because there were a lot of cuts of that film and some of them aren't great. Like, the voiceover is, it's real divisive too. It's really interesting that you brought up World of Warcraft, because that's such a great corollary for how things could have gone with Blade Runner, because Duncan Jones clearly has an affection for World of Warcraft, and the man has established that he can direct a movie. Did you like Moon? Did anybody not like Moon? So it's really interesting that like somebody who really cared about the source material and is technically capable of making a real great movie made that World of Warcraft movie.
Don't you feel like it's more safe that Dune is going to turn out to be something really special and really enjoyable than, say, the Russo
I don't know
brothers?
that's true.
Well, you don't know. I'm just saying, if you were hedging your bets, I feel more comfortable with Denis Villeneuve helming the Dune movie, because he kind of proved it with Blade Runner, than I do the Russo brothers making Magic the Gathering shows or movies. And not because the Russo brothers are incompetent. They're fantastic.
Have any great affection for the source material?
They said they do, but of course you have to say you do. That's.
Do you?
I mean, what are you gonna say? Well, we
you get on Twitter with a picture of you flexing, and be like, I don't play Magic the Gathering.
Hey, come watch my movie.
The Manganella's got to come for you.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I don't think even his stinker which we differ on this, which and I don't think it's a stinker. I think his worst film is Sicario.
Oh, you think his worst film Sicario? Oh, no.
And when your worst film is Sicario, you're doing something extremely right.
Yeah, I suppose so.
This is gonna be me, like Jason said, fanboying out, and then Jason bringing me down.
You like him. You like him a lot more than I do, and I didn't say anything before we started recording about how I felt about Villeneuve as a director. And you still don't know how I feel, but you're sort of.
I'm starting to pick it up.
let's get into it.
Yeah. All
and
right.
I'll explain myself, and then you'll just sort of talk about how he's a genius.
We got to talk about where he came from. He's another one of those great traditionalists of Canada filmmaking, like Cronenberg. You know, you don't think of Canada being this great mecca of filmmakers, but then you see who is representing, and you're just like, oh, okay. You know, it's starting to really be a place, kind of like Greece, like Yorgos Lanthimos. You know, just came out of a place that's not traditionally known for.
But isn't he it? Isn't Lanthimos basically the one guy that broke out?
There's starting to be more
really great Canadian directors. It's kind of short.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really falls off after you're like, what about Cronenberg and Denis Villeneuve and James Cameron? You know, he's good. And you're sort of like, Javier Dolan? Bruce McDonald's good, am I right? And I don't know. I would like to see more Canadian films because they're just like American films, but they're more polite.
Well, then this is the, I guess he's the antithesis to that rule, because his films are very, if I were to describe a Villeneuve film, I would say brutal. He hates violence, of course, you know, he's Canadian, but he's not afraid to display it, and he's not afraid. Like, he got a lot of shit for Polytechnique.
As import, when he uses it, he doesn't use it casually. Mm-hmm. He uses it very brutally. And the more brutal he uses it, the more it's supposed to be jarring. Like, Polytechnique was difficult to watch. And it was black and white with no blood special effects, you know?
Right.
It wasn't something like Peppermint where, like, 1 million people got their limbs blown off and you just don't care. It was incredibly graphic. Ensondy, incredibly graphic.
Oof,
you know?
Yeah.
Sicario, incredibly graphic. So he uses violence as to feel as violent as it actually does. Like Polytechnique, when the people are in the lunchroom scrambling around under the tables, you feel that sense of, you know, absolute terror. And it's not like, it's funny you compare somebody crawling under a table in Polytechnique to the same situation where someone's on top of a table in Die Hard, and it's almost cartoonish in Die Hard. And that was way bloodier, but like this is way more affecting. I think he abhors violence, and that's why he uses it a tool to evoke a response.
And I think this was more like the film that I compare this to would be Elephant by Gus Van Sant. And as an American, you'd think that I would feel more impacted by Elephant, but I think that this was so stripped down and so much more like an actual person in the room, where Elephant felt a little bit more stylized, and it just felt like, oh, we're going to give the killers a bunch of different motives and stuff. Polytechnique is not about that at all. It's just like,
it's stripped down. That's, you know, it's black and white. It's like,
yeah,
you know, the Clerks of school shooting movies.
Why am I laughing at that? Jesus.
Whereas Elephant felt a little like he wanted to make the movie kids at the same time, right?
Right, yeah.
Like he's like, I wish I could interview a bunch of 15-year-old sexy school shooters and have their stories about school shootings be interspersed with the scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, like Van Zant's not the guy to make that movie. So the fact that, you know, the Polytechnic massacre isn't a routine in Canada the way it is in the U.S., I think it has a little more import, because it's like, this is terrifying because it was just a thing that, like, how do we stop this from happening again? Mm-hmm. And, you know, there are no real answers. And in America, we're so desensitized to it. Like, at this point, we're just, like, numbly sharing that Onion headline that has the headline changed. And that's about all we do about it. And then some politicians like, we should get rid of the guns, and everyone laughs at them. And that's where we are in this country. So, of course, he got a lot of shit for Polytechnique because it was very graphic. Because it turns out massacres are very graphic.
Right. And they're not stylized with a lot of music, no score or anything. And this is a perfect segue into just kind of really diving into just his storytelling themes in general. And I think when I watch a Denis Villeneuve movie, one of the major themes that kind of rings out, there's a couple of them, but one of the major ones is the who's in control, conscious versus subconscious. And that's very evident as the shooter in Polytechnique. Even when he's writing his letter, and this is an adaptation from what really happened. He's even saying, I tried to do this, but I just feel this way, and it's a part of him, and that's what the theme is a part of you. Which one is going to drive the bus? And like Jake Gyllenhaal in Enemy is that kind of spelled out completely, where almost so obvious, where they have to make it a person split. This is his subconscious as an asshole, misogynistic cheater, and this is his, I'm going to work as a everyday teacher type role. And then you go to, Hugh Jackman in Prisoners is another thing where...
Well, that's a totally different... It's like an almost completely different spin on it, because he went full lizard brain in that movie.
Right.
Versus like, he wasn't a neurotic character like a lot of, He writes basically the incel a lot,
Yes.
Like Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Enemy is a lot like, Mark Lepine in Polytechnique.
Mm-hmm.
Just in his misogyny. And Hugh Jackman was out of control in a different way.
Right.
His motivations were different, but he was out of control just the same.
But also as intensely out of control, or at least letting that part of you take over. And even someone that's supposed to be emotionless, like Agent K from Blade Runner, like he got it into his head that he was special, and even though he's not, he's engineered to not be able to feel these things, he lets that kind of creep up and take over. So, like I said, that's kind of his main theme of who's driving the bus. And I think that's why, he picked Jake Gyllenhaal to do those two movies so close together, because Enemy was shot first, even though it came out after Prisoners.
It came out second, yeah.
He even said, like, when he was making Enemy, it started out being a commentary on his own subconsciousness, but then it turned into kind of jumping into Jake Gyllenhaal's head, kind of like a being John Malkovich type role. So it's real interesting how much that they kind of had to figure each other out. And he's just like, after those two movies, he's like, that he's now one of my best friends, but I can't stand being in a room with him half the time because we just know each other way too well.
Well, that film was a real collaboration, because I think it might have ended up a really different movie with a different actor.
Right. It's funny too, because Jake Gyllenhaal in an interview said that, I think the interviewer asked, does Denny let you improv, or does he let actors improv in general? He's like, well, he lets some, like he gives people that he feels like could handle it, but some actors, like in the same room as someone that's improv, he's like, no, you need to stick to the script.
Referring to Jeremy Renner.
Right.
I don't know why I picked him randomly.
he's just the everyday working man's actor. He'll be
go write a song about it, Jeremy Renner. Go on your tour bus and count your money. I think misogyny is a real theme, because it's funny when in the movies where he doesn't have a strong female character, if it's from a male point of view, it's almost always a misogynistic character, and I don't know why that's like his one thing that he hammers on, but you see elements of that in almost all of his films. If there's there's either a strong female character overcoming misogyny from like the establishment trying to hold her back, and from her peers, and from her feckless brother who doesn't want anything to do with helping out the family, and the the case of Onsandi, and it turns out like the whole family's pretty misogynist.
Right.
If you haven't seen the film, I'm not going to spoil it. Definitely watch it. It's on Netflix of all places. So it seems like it's either written from a female point of view dealing with misogyny, or it's written from a male point of view being a misogynist. And being able to write both of those is not super easy. And he wrote a lot of his early stuff. I think every early movie, he wrote everything up until Prisoners.
Yes.
You know? So, and he wrote Dune, but it wasn't until like 2013 he started doing adaptation. So he writes female characters very well, strong female characters that are not like Mary Sue characters. They're just, competent, I guess. And he writes misogynists real well. And I can't imagine if you're a misogynist, you can write women well. So I think he just really likes to indict that sort of mindset. Which is too bad, because if you watch like clips from Polytechnic on YouTube, a lot of incels are commenting about how Mark Lepine's a hero, and
gross.
Yeah, it's gross.
And I don't want to say that like a director like Christopher Nolan is a misogynist, although I think we both kind of found out that he just doesn't know how to write a strong female character.
And why would you?
Right.
It's not like you're a bad person if you can't do that, but, let women tell the stories, I guess.
What sets him apart is that I feel like he does know how to, but on surface level, a lot of critics have pointed out a movie like Blade Runner or a movie like Enemy, where they're just like, oh my God, it's just so misogynistic. All the women in Blade Runner are just depicted in some kind of a sexual way, but I'm just like, no.
How bad do you have to be at critical analysis?
Right.
To see an indictment of misogyny and only see the misogyny. Like, that's just, it's so inelegant. Like, did we watch the same movie? He beats you over the head with it.
Yeah, I could not believe it. Like Enemy, it's all about the indictment of a misogynistic person, but they're just like, oh, but all the women are just shot, so sexualized. But I'm like, that's the point. This is the commentary. Like, that's the whole thing with the spiders. Our main character views relationships and taking the next step and his own pregnant wife as these venomous creatures that are just there to get in his way. Even though there's like a giant spider in the room with him, he doesn't flinch, and he has that look of like, oh, even though he's gone through this main arc of, okay, I figured it out, but the slightest bit of temptation brings him right into it, and he's staring at this giant, man-eating spider. The metaphor is beating you over the face, and he's unflinching, and he has this almost like shit-eating smirk about it because he's a spider squasher. His mother is he goes to the sex club, and the main kink is them squashing spiders. It's just like, it's so...
He's the least subtle director of all time.
Yeah, kind of.
And that's one of my biggest criticisms of Villeneuve is he is not the least bit subtle, which it's art. So why leave it up to interpretation? Because if you do leave it up to interpretation, people will say whatever they want. People used to tell Ray Bradbury what Fahrenheit 451 was about. They're like, oh, it's about a culture that doesn't really value art. He's like, no, it's about how people watch TV too much and they don't read books anymore. And they're like, nah, but I really think that. And he's like, no, it's definitely about people watch too much TV. And that's why everybody in the book bought a bunch of televisions and they burned books, because it's about how people watch too much TV. Well, I really think, okay, cool. I only wrote the book, so
right, yeah,
you could be subtle sometimes. I felt like my intelligence was insulted a little bit watching some of these Villeneuve movies. But at the same time, if critics who are trained to catch this are missing it, maybe he is being too subtle with the spider webs everywhere.
It seems very entry-level big thing kind of films. Like I said, in Enemy, there's literal, like, Toronto is meant to look like a giant spider web. It has all the, there's a big focus on the interlinking telephone wires, and even when the car crash happens, it's in the shape of a spider and all this stuff. So it's there, but I think it's a good bridge, and it's still elegant. It is very obvious, but it's done in an elegant way, more so than like a Christopher Nolan, and I don't want to harp on Nolan too much, but Nolan's just there to be big, loud, in your face, where a Villeneuve film is more about, you get to settle in a little bit more. You get to chew the scenery a little bit more. And talking about a little bit more about just like misogynistic characters, like Jared Leto's character, he is the same character as Pepin from Polytechnique, where he has basically figured out how to be God in this world, where he could create life, but the one thing that he can't do is make reproduction happen. So he hates women so much because he envies them so. So, and again, that's why everything looks the way it does in that movie, as far as the sexualization of like the hologram girl, them just kind of walking around naked, is because that's what he thinks women are put there for, because he deems it so, because he's the person in power.
He can't control them, so he subverts them.
Yes.
Bludgeons you with it, but again, if people are missing it,
Right.
I don't want to give the impression I don't like his movies, and I like them even when I felt like he didn't respect my intelligence as a viewer, because, I think if you're going for a broad appeal, you don't want to make some artsy movie that everybody's got a different interpretation of. I think if you have a vision, you just execute your vision, and then you do what you need to do to make sure everybody knows the point you're trying to make. So I just found it unpleasant, but who knows? I think his career sort of spoken for itself.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing is he likes to put his kind of views on display, like in, Arrival's kind of the big no war, anti-war movie, if you strip it down, where it's just like, if people would just shut up and talk to each other, not just assume that everyone's trying to get blown up or trying to blow you up, or he even goes more heavy-handed with his short films. My favorite short film of his is The Next Floor, where it's literally an indictment on just humans consuming things, it's if you haven't seen it, it's 11 minutes, it's on YouTube. It's actually a real great watch, but the synopsis of it is a bunch of just nasty type casted characters sitting at a table just eating like it's the Dark Crystal Skeksis scene, until the literal floor falls out from underneath them, until they're falling into an abyss. Like, people like you and I get it, right? We get that it's not very subtle, but I mean, you can't say that like Enemy Explained videos on YouTube getting 3 million views because people don't get it. The general audience it's still a little big thing for them. So I think that's why I said he's kind of a better like entry level thinking director.
Well, you remember that joke on the Good Place where they're like, we got the 4 clues he gave us. He's like, I actually gave you over 1,200 clues, but
yeah,
you didn't figure them out. But hooray, you figured out the 4 of them, I guess. It's sort of like that. It's like, hey, maybe Villeneuve is giving us 1,200 spiderweb instances in Enemy before my dumbass got it, I think my favorite short of his was 120 Seconds to Get Elected.
Oh, okay.
If you didn't see that one, it's real kind of brief, but like a guy basically has 2 minutes to to get a crowd to vote for him, and like he's trying to read the room, and it really shows kind of in real time how people tailor their campaigns, because we're watching this over, a 120 month. It feels like, with the Democrats are up to now. It feels like we're watching this in glacial time, where Beto O'Rourke gets super fired up about something and he accidentally lets a swear word slip, and everyone's like, we like what you said. He's like, oh, you like when I said shit? And everyone's like, no, we liked your message.
Right.
He's like, I'm going to say shit a bunch now.
That's going to be my thing.
So I kind of thought that was really funny, because it was sort of that whole Beto missing the point thing encapsulated in a short film about a guy who's only got like 2 minutes, and he's just sort of trying to be like what people cheer for. He's like, oh, you want more of that?
Right.
It's really cynical, but it was a good little short film. And we don't talk about director shorts enough, but like maybe we should start, because I think those are really, if it's like 120 seconds to make the case for yourself as a director also.
Yeah, sure.
So he's got to be just as pithy and like try to give you what he thinks you want. So yeah,
they're nice little bits of glue in between their larger projects. The filmmakers that do make shorts still, and I mean this one was like I referenced earlier, Next Floor. It debuted at Cannes in 2008 and it won the Semaine de la Critique, which is like the award for the best short that year. So I mean, as he stated it eloquently in a interview, he just loves filmmaking. He doesn't like interviews. He doesn't like talking about it. He basically is just like, I spelled it out for you on the screen. Why do we need to talk about it?
I love filmmaking. I don't love what I'm doing right now. I don't like interviews. I don't like TV. I don't like. It's something that I'm just here because I love you.
Like the strong female characters is anti-hero protagonist, either center stage or kind of the number two, like a Benicio del Toro in Sicario. He likes throwing the kind of unlikable person that you or even like unlikable, but still with a heart of gold. Like I think Hugh Jackman is in The Prisoners.
Character was like if that T-shirt that's like my daughter's boyfriend came over and I threw a shotgun shell at him and said they come faster after 11 p.m. Like if that kind of bumper sticker was a person, that's his character in that movie, and I fucking hate that energy. Yeah, that right wing gun dad energy, you know. So like, that's not a likable protagonist, but at the same time, you're like, man, what would I do if that was my kid? So you're sort of like, all right. That's a bit much, but also, is it a bit much? So I felt real conflicted watching that movie, which I thought was very forgettable. I didn't even know Villeneuve directed it when I saw it, you know?
Yeah.
So my mom just buys DVDs and she just has a huge stack of them for me to watch when I come over. And I would just plow through a stack of DVDs, and that was one of them. And I was like, oh, that was a thing. And then it wasn't until we did this that I remembered I'd seen it. So it was pretty forgettable movie. But at the same time, Hugh Jackman was at 11 that whole movie. And, you know, he was a real anti-hero. Smashing shit with hammers. So
smashing a mentally disabled child with hammers.
Hey, man. If you want to hit Paul Dano in the face with a hammer, like, I'm here for it. It turns out.
He is the younger version of Daniel Day-Lewis.
Take that, Swiss Army douche. All right.
Oh, yeah.
I like that movie. I like Paul Dano. Whatever. I'll shit on people I like. That's why I have my own show. I can do that.
That's true. Get your own platform. Yeah, it's just like we would all want to think that we would be the raging out Hugh Jackman character, but we'd probably all be the Terrence Howard just relegated to crying in the corner.
Just crying. Yeah. I made a special box that says 2 + 2 = 5. And nobody believes me, and now I'm not in the MCU anymore.
Like you could say that Kay, obviously Kay is kind of an anti-hero. He just has an arc, but more like Robin Penn Wright is, as the police chief in that film, is kind of a real asshole. But she also is the one that kind of saves the entire thing from falling apart. So he likes that duality. The mom in Incendies, perfect example, right? The woman that sings, a complete, almost a terrorist. She commits a giant, political crime without giving too much away. But she's also doing it for all good reasons, for lack of a better term.
We're being evasive because the film takes a really long time to show you exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Because he loves doing that, too. He loves giving you only as much information as you need to stay interested. And he's not subtle about that either. There's something that really bugs me about the way he reveals information.
Just people versus the establishment also. Like, it's all about, Prisoners is... It's a father not only battling what's right for the truth, but also battling the police because he doesn't feel like they're competent enough. And he kind of proves that point correct, though. God forbid your kid getting stolen from you. Who's that going to affect the most? Who's that going to be the most important to? It's not even the beat cop.
That's your thing. Yeah. It's like the season 2 of Mindhunter. If you haven't seen season 2 of Mindhunter, the front and center are some concerned mothers in Atlanta who, based on real women who wouldn't let the mayor, hear the end of it, wouldn't let the police hear the end of it. For years, they're like, our children are missing, this matters, and they just wouldn't be silenced. And they were real strong characters. As much as Hugh Jackman's character in Prisoners is like the douchey version of that, I was reminded of that watching season 2 of Mindhunters. Or like, like the kidnapping version of Lorenzo's Oil, where it's like, no one is ever going to give as much of a shit about this as we do, so let's go figure out biochemistry and save our kid. You know? That we like those kind of movies for a reason, because we would like to feel like if we are ever in a perilous situation, we're not powerless. So juxtaposing something like Prisoners, where someone takes the law into their own hands, with something like Polytechnique, where everybody who has those, diehard jerk-off fantasies, you're like, I'm going to go John McClane on these guys, and you would just be pissing yourself under a lunch table. Right. I really like that juxtaposition of, those two different situations.
And how he's even like, I'm going to take on the feminist movement. I have to kill these specific women because they're going to be in roles in life that are meant for men. That's even that's taking on his own kind of fantasy of an establishment or a corrupt establishment.
And I don't know if this ever happened in real life, because there weren't any survivors in that room. So this probably didn't happen. But there's a scene where some of the women ask him why, and he's just like, because you're going to become engineers.
Yeah. Blade Runner, again, taking on the establishment, of course, like not just having to stay in your lane, like even something, and I say something because, he's a manufactured person. He is a replica of a human being that's told to be this one thing. Like, I watched the short, I think it's like Blade Runner 2039, or 2036, and it's like a little short with Jared Leto.
I love that because it had great actors that weren't in the movie.
Yeah.
That I loved that.
But it added so much weight to Kay's choice, because he even shows the angel where he's just like, okay, now kill yourself, or kill me or kill yourself. And the guy just takes himself out, where, and Kay's part of this kind of newer edition of these replicants. So that makes his turn with so much more gravitas to it. Sicario, of course, that's a huge, against the establishment, a rival. Again, that movie, she succeeds with, in spite of having to, tell the rest of the world that they're stupid and wrong, because everyone's just so damn trigger happy. She saves the universe in spite itself, and then makes a very bizarre decision and decides to just kind of love and live in the moment, and then knowingly be miserable after that.
Well, she's Dr. Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
She becomes Dr. Manhattan, so...
See, I didn't even get that. That's... Yeah.
As much as it's people versus the establishment, it kind of feels like outsiders versus the establishment. And there's, you can take Polytechnic as an example of that. The guy was a real outsider. He felt like, isolated. But look at Prisoners. The guy was working outside the police system. Sicario, the guy was doing some real shady extra legal stuff. Arrival, this was a linguist trying to interface with the military and like try to steer that thing. Ansandi, somebody from the West going over to the East, not having any idea about their culture and really feeling like an infiltrator,
Well,
like
and everyone wrong and dying over religion, right? Like everyone's an asshole, and she's caught in the middle.
Yep. Blade Runner, you get a replicant trying to deal with the whole like replicants as servants infrastructure. A lot of people feel like outsiders in a lot of these movies,
and overcoming a lot of obstacles. And we talked about, this was a reoccurring theme from the Jim Jarmusch episode, where he does a lot of cultural barriers and language barriers. And Denis Villeneuve is like, again, kind of beats you over the head with the language barriers, where an entire sci-fi drama is about the language barrier and how important that is. And Incendies is...
Incendies was about that as well.
Yeah.
It was about cultural and linguistic barriers and religious barriers. She went over to the Middle East and she was a complete outsider in every possible way. Even though it was her own family. that
Yeah.
made her feel like an outsider. It's on Netflix. If you don't mind some subtitles, give it a shot.
And I mean, use them because it's in Arabic, it's in French, it's Sicario, fish out of water again. It's all about stepping outside your comfort zone. I feel like Emily Blunt's character and Amy Adams are very similar. They're just one's thrust in a very violent situation, but it's very like fish out of water, stepping outside your comfort zone and having to kind of succeed when not only the thing that you're against is so insurmountable, but the people that you're with are against you as well.
Wow, that was Emily Blunt. I thought that was Amy Adams in both movies.
Oh,
I feel like he's got better at respecting audiences' intelligence as time has gone on. I will say that because, like Maelstrom, I felt like you bludgeon people a little bit, and I feel like as the movies have had more commercial success, he's tried to dial it back a little bit to not seem as preachy, and I think he's run into some trouble because, like, his latter films, people have said he was a little bit misogynistic, whereas like earlier, it was very clear where he was coming from. So I felt like he's developed a little bit more of a deft touch, and maybe he's gone a little too far. If you get a chance to watch Maelstrom, I thought it was quite good. He made that 10 years before Polytechnique, and didn't make a whole ton in between there. I don't know what he was doing, but don't sleep on August 32nd on Earth either, because like as far as first efforts go,
yeah,
it's a little. I mean, if you don't speak French, it's it sucks to have to deal with that, and that's just something that like critics that go to these film festivals they're like, all right, we're going to read some subtitles, and that's fine, But this was it was an Uncertain Regard nominee, and that's an award we've seen a lot of directors we've really liked their first film, get nominated or win the Uncertain Regard award. So like the fact that this August 32nd was a nominee for that, it goes a long way to. We always talk about people's first effort.
Yeah,
it was. We talk about Jarmusch, but this kind of seemed like a French-Canadian Stranger Than Paradise almost.
Okay, yeah.
It was a little bit that and like a little bit Et tu Mama Tambien mixed up. So like, it wasn't subtle is what I'm saying.
Right. See, and I feel I got the total different read because I think that like something like Blade Runner, where he relegated to using voiceover of prior dialogue in the film, where I was like, oh, that's not good. Like that was. You
remember this, Dum Dum?
Yeah,
the movie's 3 hours. I hope you remember this.
I don't need to hear Dave Bautista at all, but let alone again in voiceover later. And I'm just like, oh, don't do that. This is so much smarter than this. This is such a that was the one day that Scott was on set.
But you know when voiceover gets put in. When test audiences don't fucking get it.
Right, yeah.
You put VO in where people are like, who was he?
Or you let Terrence Malick drunkenly stumble on your set. That's when voiceover happens with a GoPro.
Terrence. I got Dave Bautista drunk and gave him a GoPro, and there's our movie.
He's farming bugs. Yeah.
Yeah. When we were filming August 32nd on Earth, we saw Christian Bale stumbling around the same desert in Salt Lake City that we were shooting.
Somehow he was still 45 years old back then. Yeah, it's caught in some weird time loop like the aliens from Arrival. Yeah, it's all a circle. But
you perceive time as I do. You can see Terrence Malick film.
Speaking of circles, let's talk a little bit about some of the visual signatures, the visual cues in a Denis Villeneuve film, because there are quite a bit and they're quite prominent. He likes to start a lot of his films out with either long pull-out shots where he kind of slowly unveils something out of place or unsettling or horrific. Like
huge, like wide. Yeah, he's like, look how big this place is. You could never possibly know everything you need to know about this place, you small, insignificant person. Look how big Toronto looks from a crane.
Yeah, Yeah, it's still ugly. But like, as opposed to like a Wes Anderson where he stacks his shot, there's a lot of layers to his shots where there's a lot of depth and dimension. Where, yeah, Denny just kind of starts in a very small spot, and like a pinpoint spot, and then pulls out to unveil the entire picture. Or conversely, slowly goes in for a real slow zoom in, an uncomfortable zoom in, where you have the feeling of either entering a place or a body, like that real slow pull into the eyeball in Blade Runner. So that's how he likes setting up, establishing shots for his terrain or his characters.
So what I alluded to earlier about something I don't like about how he reveals information, he gives you like only as much as you need to keep interested, and takes the whole film to tell you the whole story. He literally has characters like barely illuminated in the beginning of the movie, and like as the movie goes on, he illuminates more. It's like, ooh, look, you're in the dark. Ooh, you're not as much in the dark anymore. And it's like so like literal. Like if you watch Arrival, it's like a big black room where they're talking to the aliens with like a white screen. And every time they learn a little bit more about the language, they zoom in on the screen a little more, and there's a little more white in the frame.
Right.
And it's just like, all right, I get it. Your characters are literally in the dark. Do you understand what I'm doing? They don't know what's going on. They're in the dark. And then he's good with the color palette, but like even in his black and white films, he can do that because it's like, all right, you're just literally in the dark. And I think that's kind of gross, but also like I understand why he does it, because if you're just watching a movie to watch a movie and you're not picking it apart like we are, when I watched Arrival, I didn't feel that way. But now that I'm going through trying to dissect it, of course, I'm like, oh, God. So maybe I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at myself for like the fact that it worked. And it was such a simple technique that he used, and it worked on me and I didn't catch it. Maybe that's what I'm mad about. But like he just loves to do that. He also loves to change the color palette. Yeah. So anytime the color palette's different, you're like, this scene matters. It's like,
yeah.
It's like Schindler's List is like, oh, I wonder if that chick in the red dress is important.
He storytells with his color too. Like in Prisoners, everything is super like warm and inviting. Like in the beginning when they're all having like Thanksgiving meal, and then when shit hits the fan, everything gets real cold blue.
Everybody's wearing gray and black the whole movie until, oh, that person has red mittens. I wonder if they're important.
Yeah, like Enemy is all shot in this horrible, sickly yellow, where you just are kind of, it's like a POV from something non-human, like an insect. And then he'll have certain things, like you said, like pop. Like there's one scene in Enemy where one of the Jake Gyllenhaals is sitting on his motorbike in a very like almost pink helmet, and I'm like, whoa, that's a weird choice. But he wants you to see him out. He wants you to see the spider in the web, basically. He likes framing these emotions, and Blade Runner's the same, where everything's super neon, and that's a holdover, of course, from the original.
Well, yeah, he was bound by the original vision, but he managed to find ways to play within the established color palette, which I thought was really deft on his part. Well, and of course, deft on Roger Deakins, who's comes up more than most of the filmmakers we talk about. Well, he's won more awards for Denis Villeneuve films than Denis Villeneuve has. So
that's true. Yeah,
I mean, Roger Deakins is one hell of a cinematographer. So
with Sam Mendes too, like it seems like Roger Deakins at this point of his life is just kind of working with those two. Deakins' style lends perfectly to a Villeneuve direction. Like he likes using single camera. It's just more intimate, because when you are up, in dialogue, or even setting it up, looking at Ryan Gosling's, like just looking out, doing the Ryan Gosling thing of not talking and just zooming in on his face. That's what that's there for. And everything. I like the fact that a lot of it's in camera too. They try to do as much in camera as far as the lighting, and there's no filters or anything, which is crazy, because you think of us like the Las Vegas scene in Blade Runner, and that's all practical.
One thing he does that I really like is he doesn't introduce characters to the camera head on. And this is something you'll pick up if you watch enough of his films. Like the first time you see a character, if you see their face, it's almost always in a mirror. And I thought there was some like symbolic reason he did this. Like, what's that a metaphor for? No, he just likes to do that. They're sitting in the bathtub and you see their face in the mirror in the bathroom, or 3 different times he introduced a character for the first time sitting in a car and you see their face in the rearview mirror of the car from the back. The first time you see a person, it's almost always the back of their head. Just go watch Blade Runner 2049 and do a shot every time. The first time you see a character, you see the back of their head before you see their face.
Right.
You will get so shit-faced, watching that movie. It's really interesting how he does that, but like, you don't realize that that's what he's doing, but he loves to do that. And he does that Hitchcockian technique that I really liked when Shyamalan did it, where sometimes something like violent or explosive or whatever will happen off screen, and you'll see the character react to it, and then you'll see the thing that they reacted to, so you're primed to be more affected by it. And that was, that's a Hitchcockian technique that's, they teach you, that's film school 101, but like, not everybody does it, and that's something Villeneuve uses to great effect, especially these super violent movies like Incendie and Sicario and stuff like that.
The dinner scene from Sicario is like the perfect example of that, right? Where he sits down at the table, the guy's begging for his life, and then off camera but he doesn't show the dad reacting or the drug cartel guy. It goes back to Benicio del Toro committing the horrific act with no expression changing, and that just goes to show how far he's been broken.
And that's his impassive facial expression is the import of that scene. Yes. So the fact that he captures that and doesn't show him afterward, it's really important. That's a great technique, and not a lot of people do that better than Villeneuve. Another thing he likes to do is if he's not showing their face, he's obscuring their face. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, oh, that's through lace curtains, or that's through like a window or something like that. He really likes to give you information real slowly. And as much as like, I think it's dumb and obvious where he's like, oh, this character is partially illuminated because you're in the dark, idiot. When he does that other ways where he obscures the person's face the first time you see them, or, like when they're in a scene doing something to make you pay more attention, I think that has a lot of impact. And again, maybe I'm mad because I didn't catch this stuff when I was watching these films casually.
Right.
And when I went back through to dissect them, I was like, oh, God, that's what he did? I'm an idiot. So maybe I'm just mad that Film School 101 shit worked on me. But
where that kind of drives up the impact of it. He slow rolls the reveal of Sean Young's replicant that, Wallace makes, almost to like where it's, we have to zoom in on the shadowy image or the silhouette, then we got to zoom in on the heels, and then, or even in Incendies where, she sees the dots on, the tattoo on the foot, and then you slowly pan up. It's effective. It sounds so elementary as far as filmmaking 101 goes, because it's just like, this is how to build tension. But he does it in a way that's really effective, where you really get to like, because then your brain starts kicking in. You're just like, oh shit, am I really seeing what I'm about to see? And then when it, 9 times out of 10, it reveals it does, and you're just like, oh, damn, like it really went there. So it's
a technique called priming.
Yeah.
And it works, and that's why people do it.
And another thing as far as priming goes is you're never gonna, unless you're watching Incendies and a big Radiohead album, most of the time for like foreboding sounds, right? Borderline synth, but just sounds that are just there to make you feel uneasy. And he worked a lot with Johan Johansson, tragically killed himself in 2018.
He OD'd?
He OD'd on coke, yeah.
So it wasn't tragic for him. He went out doing what he loved.
He went out like a champ.
Making weird synth music to creep people out and jamming blow up both his nostrils. Right. So, like, the man burned the candle at both ends, and,
Maybe his spirit left with the cephalopods or whatever they're called. When
you perceive time the way Amy Adams does in that movie, you realize that you should just cram a bunch of blow into your head and enjoy it.
He put it in circles, not in straight lines.
What a loss.
Yeah, Yeah,
for
seriously.
cinema, because Johansson was just the master of the creepy synth crap. Like, unless Tom York is singing the song, Villeneuve doesn't like a lot of lyrical songs in his movies.
Right.
You know, he's like, there will be a Radiohead song, even if it's in the Middle East, but I mostly just want Hans Zimmer riffing on a synth, and that it matters. He primes you with music as well as with color. You know, he does a ton of priming in his movies. You know when a scene's important, even if you don't consciously know that the scene's important, because he's primed you so well.
If you were to pick a top 3, like if the person that you're talking to has never heard of Denis Villeneuve, which 3 would you be like, these are the ones that you need to see?
To get to like the 3 best movies, or like to grasp who he is as a director?
I think more so grasp.
3 movies that encompass him?
Yes. Yeah.
I would say stay away from the adapted stuff. You know, and that even includes Arrival, because that's adapted.
Right, it is.
Too. So I might say Polytechnique, Incendie, and Sicario, or Polytechnique, Incendie, and maybe Enemy.
I feel like he would disagree with you, because he likes the drama. He just likes film in general, but
Sure.
I feel like now he's making the films that he wants to make, and this was what he wanted to do. He just wanted to be he wanted to be a Kubrick. He didn't want to take on the task, like I said before, of doing Blade Runner, but he literally said, I had to do it so no one else would fuck it up.
I love the first movie so much. It's a movie that was part of my cinematic education. I was like raised with Blade Runner. It's a movie that was by far one of my favorite movie of all time. So I said, I don't want someone else to fuck this up. I mean, I need to. Even it's like a suicidal mission, you know. It's like super risky. Everybody will hate me. I can be banned from the cinematic community from the rest of my life, but it's worth the risk. Artistically, it's such a big challenge, but it's such a beautiful one.
Because it just meant those slow-rolling, borderline boring sci-fis is just like what he wants to do. And look at the 2 projects he picked, Blade Runner and Dune, 2 of the...
I mean, Blade Runner wasn't as fraught because nobody thought anyone was going to try to remake it or, you know, do a sequel or anything, but everybody's been like, I could do Dune, and they can't. I mean, David Lynch sent you into theater with a pamphlet, for Christ's sake. It's like, hey, this is a 9,000... It's like trying to do The Stand as a 90-minute movie. It's like, you can, but...
Or The Dark Tower. Thanks a lot, you bastards. Yeah.
Nobody would ever try to make The Dark Tower as one movie. Come on, that's idiotic.
Yeah, that didn't happen. I'm just gonna, all right, and move on.
All right, time's a flat circle rolling, man.
What a squandered performance by Idris Elba, because I thought that was really a cool choice going with him for Roland, and then they just fucked it up, like, so bad.
Yeah, well, yeah, he was the only good thing about that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, man, I'm just running through the desert, and the gunslinger follows, man.
And, you know, to kind of answer my own question, I think even how great Incendies is, I feel like that's like the best M. Night Shyamalan movie ever, because it has that kind of twist. And I think there is a lot of parallels between the 2.
Well, they're both real students of Hitchcock, because they, you know, they both, we talk about, they employ a lot of the same techniques. And, you know, where they diverged, Denis Villeneuve's career took off when he stopped insisting on writing the movies he directed, and
right,
you know, Shyamalan did not.
Yeah, I think Polytechnique, Enemy you just have, like, those are the 2 that really encompass what he's doing. And I think Blade Runner is such a accomplishment that he took something and elevated it in a way where I think that even like Scott was just like, oh, like this is pretty special.
Here's something you're not gonna like.
Yeah,
if you'd shown me Blade Runner 2049 and told me Rian Johnson directed, I'd be like, oh, far out, good job.
No, I would believe you. Like it does, you know. Rian Johnson just had the unfortunate, you know, opportunity to direct a Star Wars film and try to have an original voice with it, and then the fans are just so toxic that they just ripped him apart for it. I respect.
Well, yeah, the
what he was
people that
going
didn't
for.
like Rian Johnson's Star Wars are the same people like saying that Mark Lapine was a hero in the comments on the Polytechnic videos on YouTube. So
Yeah.
take what those incels say with a grain of salt, I guess.
A little hand in hand, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised with how I don't want to say you're unimpressed, but you know, I was expecting this to just be a big old love fest, that we were just gonna metaphorically be smooching this French Canadian on the lips this entire runtime. But yeah, you opened. I would have to say you opened my eyes to a couple of faults, and although I still think he is the modern day Stanley Kubrick of our time, he's not a perfect director.
You know, who is a perfect director? So
I hope you enjoyed this thing that we did and that we will continue to do. I hope you enjoy it over in the podcast format too, because you could go head over to Spotify and iTunes, leave us all the ratings, like this video, thumbs up, share it with your friends, tell people that we like talking about films. This is truly a labor of love. If you do want to talk to Jason Eleanor Alt about movies, you can, and he'll tell you how.
if you head over to the Twitter, which is a website on the internet, I'm Jason E. Alt on the Twitter, and if you go to the pin post at the very top of my profile, I link all the different projects I work on around the internet. This is one of them. It's one of my favorites, and thanks so much for tuning in.
Absolutely. If you'd like to talk to me about films or otherwise, you could do so on Twitter as well, @OrzovDone. So until next time, something about spiders or something.
Yeah, man.